Today we're going to talk about water. Why didn't I use warm water? Hey guys, so far in First Peter, we've gotten up to see that we're firstly called to act a certain way, not to speak evil of someone, how to act. And it gets then into suffering. It says you can be suffering for right and wrong, so make sure it's for the right reasons. Which is, like we talked about, is kind of comforting, but also discomforting. But now we get to see, why do we suffer? And if you read this all the way through, it kind of reads like an essay, where often he'll make a point and then say, while I'm on here, this supports it. Oftentimes we'll see that when we have to, in literature class, when you have to write an essay, on your laptop, you have to have your, thesis, but then you have to defend it, right? So that's what he's doing here. He's showing us, how did Christ die? Where did he suffer? And it shows us that until the moment he went to heaven, he suffered. So we're going to be reading 18 through 22 today of 1 Peter chapter 3. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, and once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through the water. There is also an antitype which now saves us, baptism, not the removal of the filth of flesh, but the answer of a good conscience towards God, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers of having been made subject to him. So, we get to see here kind of how Christ suffered and where he is now. Firstly, we're going to start in 18. So, for Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit. So, it goes ahead, and this is kind of the thesis, saying he was put to death, he had to suffer, and now he's alive. And we got to keep in mind with that suffering, it wasn't just like he took 50% of the pain off because he's God and he can do that. No, we have to keep in mind that he didn't just, he felt every bit of this. It wasn't like he, used his God power so it was a little bit easier. No, he felt this as if he was a human. He felt the pain. He felt every bit of it. We have to keep in mind that it wasn't some cakewalk, that even before this, we saw he bled just from the anxiety. It said sweat like blood. So we need to keep that in mind as we go in here, not saying, oh, well, that would have been easier for Christ. Moving on, 19 says, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison. So what we see is, remember that, he went to hell for those 3 days. That's where he went. He still suffered. He, in that moment on the cross when he died, and we're about to see this going into Easter season, from that moment on, he won. But he still suffered. He still felt that when it happened. Verse 20, who formerly were disobedient when once the divine, long-suffering, waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through water. So we see that these are demons from Noah's day, which these people would have known well because they were Jewish. This would have been kind of their Bible. And remember that demons in Noah's day would have been just running the earth rampantly through the earth. There was nothing really stopping them. They did whatever they wanted. This was a lot of people that allowed these demons to just totally, plunge in whatever they found good. And so, or whatever felt good, I guess I should say. And then it hits us with water example number 1. There are 2 types of water examples in this. Number 1 is that of the flood, representing God's judgment. Right, when it cleaned the earth, but in a way that God said, there's only 8 people that even somewhat deserve to live. So God, this is one of his first examples of his judgment. Then we get to see how water changes, how God's wrath changes, because he's the same God, but now we have Christ on our side, which changes it. It says in 21, there is also an antitype which now saves us. So an antitype is John Piper says John MacArthur says it's an earthly expression of a spiritual reality. These are things like communion, sacrifices for sin, those things, they call them shadows of heaven, where we get to see that it's like, in Hebrews they call them earthly shadows, meaning we just get a little bit of an idea of what it's going to be like up there. Our worship is often like that too, where, in heaven it's going to be multiplied so much, but we get a little taste of it here on earth. And so now we can be baptized. It says, it's not the removal of filth and flesh, but the answer of a good conscience towards God. So it's not a cleaning of our bodies. It's not, don't think of a bath, but instead freeing up our conscience, that we get to show our baptism, show our being saved through this no longer guilty conscience. Another way you can think about it is, the way our church looks at it, and the way what we believe is that baptism does not save you, but rather now it's a way to show that you have been saved. It's a way to, as Ken would say, raise your flag, showing that you now have been saved. And it's a great way to show everybody that, to invite people to church, because it's a huge deal. But again, it's an earthly expression. It's just showing that now we've been saved. But our souls have already gone through that. And then finally, it ends with, in 22, who has gone into heaven is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him. So we get to see kind of where is he now. He is at the right hand of God. He is exactly where he should be. He is where he can be to give us that good conscience, to help save us, to be our mediator. That's the main point. Christ has suffered with us, has offered us a new salvation, and is now waiting for us. He is now all around us. He has sent us Spirit, and now he is at the right hand of God where he should be. So really just two questions this week. Firstly, are you ready to join him? Are you looking forward to meeting Christ on his throne? And secondly, do you see suffering how Christ saw it? Christ saw the big picture. He knew he had to do this. He went out. Do we go with that same mind, knowing that should we get teased, persecuted, those kind of things, is it worth it? Do we keep that in mind? So next week we're going to start talking about Easter, and man, I can't wait till this is over. Tell you what. I'll see you guys.